Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marlinda Henry, President of National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals and the Director of Events and Planning for Full Gospel Baptist Church Fellowship. And I would like to welcome you to the State of Black Cultural virtual experience during the Cincinnati Music Festival. This event is supported by the African American Chamber of Commerce. Vibe Cincinnati presents Cincinnati USA CVB, National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals, P&G, and Cincy Soul, the Black Taste. I would like to begin with a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is approximately 90 minutes, 60 minutes of a panel discussion, and 30 minutes of a call to action. There will be a chime at the 2-minute mark to alert the moderators of their time. Questions can be placed in the chat, and since the audience is muted, please utilize our chat box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. We will proceed with introductions of our moderators and our host of this afternoon. We would like to welcome former State of Ohio Senator and the current president of the Greater Cincinnati African American Chamber of Commerce, Eric Carney, and Jason Dunn Sr., Board Chair and the National Coalition of Black Meeting Professionals Chair, and the Greater Cincinnati African American Chamber of Commerce, who will introduce our panelists and offer an opening statement at this time.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Kearney. I'm honored to be here as president of the Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky African American Chamber of Commerce. This is an exciting event. I think you will absorb a lot of knowledge and information. It's really an absolutely fantastic event, and I want to thank all of the panelists for being here. Jason, I know that you have some opening remarks, so please share them.
We believe that tourism empowers communities. And if the music festival was physically held in Cincinnati this weekend, the economic impact would be an estimated $107 million in 2.5 days. That money would be recycled throughout the community, and in particularly within the communities of color. The ecosystem of tourism encompasses music, business, education, faith, politics, and empowerment. And today we will find the intersection of those components and how Black culture is influencing the nation. I'll yield to Senator Kearney, who will then introduce a couple of the panelists who are here. And we'll begin the dialogue as stated. Senator Kearney.
Thank you very much, Jason Dunn, and thank you for all the work that you're doing with the Greater Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky African American Chamber. Let me begin by introducing Dr. Dina Bennett, who is the curatorial director of the National Museum of African American Music and an ethnomusicologist who specializes in African American music and culture. Dr. Bennett has previously served in a number of capacities, not only at Washburn University in Topeka, Kansas, but also the director of education at the B.B. King Museum and Delta Interpretive Center in Indianola, Mississippi, and as the manager of collections and exhibitions at the American Jazz Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. She's obviously a very intelligent person, and I'll tell you a little bit about her education. Originally from Topeka, Kansas, Dr. Bennett earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication Studies from Washburn University, a master's degree in college student personnel from Kansas State University, and a PhD in ethnomusicology with a minor in African American and American diaspora studies from Indiana University. Welcome, Dr. Bennett.
Let me introduce Ako Kambon, president of the Visionary Leaders Institute. He is a dynamic, versatile, motivational speaker and trainer. Mr. Kambon is nationally recognized as a leader in the fields of educational consulting and designing and conducting leadership seminars for public and private educational institutions. Senator Kearney.
Thank you. Next, let me introduce Dr. Melba Moore. Dr. Moore is the Cincinnati Health Department Board of Health Director. She has extensive experience in public health. During her past 17 years in St. Louis, Dr. Moore was successful in developing and implementing health programs for improving outcomes with asthma, obesity, childhood lead poisoning, sexually transmitted infections, environmental health, and violent crimes. She is a doctoral candidate at North Central University. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from Webster University and a Master's of Science in Health Management from Lindenwood University. Thank you for being here, Dr. Moore.
Bishop Neil Ellis, my good friend, born and raised in the Bahamas, is the presiding bishop of the Global United Fellowship. The Global United Fellowship is an international body of spiritual leaders, fellowships, and congregations united to strategically plan, implement, and execute transformative and generational change, as well as expand the kingdom of God to all nations of the world. It is for this reason, he says, he was born. Bishop is internationally known and has been recognized by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth of England for rendering distinguished services in the Commonwealth nations. Senator Kearney.
Thank you. Next, I'll introduce Dr. Andre Perry, who is a fellow in the Metropolitan Policy Program at Brookings. He is also the author of a new book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities. He's a commentator on MSNBC. He's been published in the New York Times, The Nation, The Washington Post, TheRoot.com, and CNN.com. Some of his research, which is very meaningful to me in the work that I do with the African American Chamber, has spotlighted the troubles and struggles of Black businesses, including artists, arts institutions, restaurants, barbershops, and beauty parlors, as they await federal relief from the COVID-19 economic impact. He has a number of other writings that are frankly too numerous to mention. He's a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and has earned his PhD in education policy and leadership from the University of Maryland, College Park. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Perry.
Evita Robinson, founder of No Madness Travel Tribe, continues to innovate the travel space, which has landed No Madness in the print and digital pages of the New York Times, Travel and Leisure, Entrepreneur, The Daily Beast, Ebony Essence, and many more. Evita's accolades include National Geographic's 21 Most Visionary Women throughout the travel history, 2018's Afar Travel Vanguard Award, the Route 100, and being noted as one of the Entrepreneur Magazine's 50 Most Daring Entrepreneurs of 2018. Let me first start with you, Evita. Can you tell us or give us your perspective of the state of Black culture from your vantage point?
We're calling to account. You're seeing a lot of things happen in various different industries. And as far as travel is concerned, you are seeing the industry being called out. I am one of a number of faces and organizations that has been at the forefront of doing that. Other team members of mine like Martinique Lewis and Colby Holiday are a part of different initiatives like the Black Travel Alliance, which is new, but has been making major waves in the travel industry as far as holding the industry accountable, from brands to boards of tourism to different organizations and groups, making sure that diversity and inclusion isn't just a mouthpiece or a talking point, but something that is really embedded in the DNA. And even kind of, you know, pushing their back to the wall with certain deadlines and being able to publish what they're doing, what their staff looks like, what is their E-suite, C-suite, what does all of that look like in this regard. And so for that, you're seeing a real awakening that's happening. Like I said, a call to action, which I know we're going to be getting on this end later on in the afternoon, but you're seeing us come to the light. I'm also noticing too, within the travel industry, that there's finally a fusion that is starting to happen between, I think, the boards of tourism, particularly the people of color that are represented in these boardrooms, like yourself, Jason, and the social media influencers, the community organizers, the activists, those of us who may be on the forefront of the media conversation and the social media conversation. I see us coming together in a way to work with one another that I haven't seen before, because there's a lot of differences with our swag is all important, but we flex a little different on different sides of the industry, but they're all important. You know, every single role that we all play is important. And I'm starting to see us come together with the likes of events like this, where it's cross-generational, it's cross-industry. And that's something that I can't say I've seen thus far. And it's cool to be a part of that initiative. Also, I jumped right into the question, but thank you for having me. I don't want to be rude. And it's good to see you.
Ms. Robinson, I remember when you came to Cincinnati, I think it was 2 years ago, and spoke,
Yes.
and you were very dynamic then.
Thank you.
We're having this conference virtually instead of being able to shake each other's hands. And one reason for that is obviously this coronavirus that we've all experienced.
Yes.
Dr. Moore, if you would share with us a little bit about what you see the impact of the coronavirus, COVID-19, has had on Black culture. I think maybe you're muted, Dr. Moore.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. It's so enlightening and refreshing to see everyone's faces. COVID-19 in the city of Cincinnati, what I will tell you and share with you, what we're seeing across this country, it frightens me. We, African Americans, people of color, are disproportionately impacted and affected. And you know, when I think about COVID started, I stood up Incident Command January 29th, because I knew that's what I was supposed to do, because this was an emerging situation, infectious disease. But as I stood that up, and we went through the first 3 months, and then I started to see, you know, we were looking at data. What is the data telling us? African Americans are disproportionately affected. I took a look last week. I said I wanted to capture some numbers. And we had a total of 1,374 cases that were African Americans out of a total of 3,133. 1,350 were males. And when I kept looking at this, over the course of the first 3 months, I noticed that it would fluctuate from females to males, the increase leading the numbers. But my message today, people of color, our Black and brown brothers and sisters, it's killing us. And I know scare tactics don't work. But what I want to say here, anybody listening, everyone listening, mask up, 6 feet back. We have to be engaged and involved in this social contract so that we can get a handle and move forward. But we are disproportionately more affected.
Bishop, from your perspective, can you give the state of Black culture from the faith perspective, sir? I think you're on mute, Bishop.
Yes, I got you. Blessings upon each of you and good afternoon to all of you. I cannot begin to express the delight that I have in sharing this panel with all of you today. I want to give it from two perspectives, Jason. First of all, understand and appreciate the fact that while I serve in great capacity in your country, I'm from outside of your country. And I want to say really, for the African-American culture, these to me, as it relates to the state of the church, are some exciting times. Pandemics or problems have the ridiculous kind of power of pulling people together to a new place. And I think for the church community, what is happening now is we are seeing brothers and sisters, particularly members of the clergy, come together in ways that we have not done so in many, many years. The pandemic that we're dealing with now has literally placed so many people on the level playing field when it comes to ministry. For the most part, all of our churches have been closed. They're opening up here and there now, but that pushed all of us to a place where we had to find creative and progressive ways of not only ministering to our people, but also surviving in the midst of this, because it pushed us to a new place. And we learned the real value, I think, in the last 15, 16 weeks of iron sharpening iron. And so I only see great things actually coming out of this for the faith-based community, particularly the African-American church. We are hearing from one another now like we never have before. We are sharing with one another now like we never shared before. And of course, this has pushed us into a major degree of theological creativity. People are becoming more and more creative in the midst of a crisis. And of course, we are proving it true to bear that you never let a good crisis go to waste. And so, Jason, if I sound excited, it's because I really am. I think these, though they are the worst of times, they are the best of times. And I just can't wait for the months ahead of us to really put in place what so many of us together now have put on the table.
Understood.
Thank you for that, Pastor. Dr. Kambon, could you please share with us the educational perspective and what impact you see as happening with Black culture?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, both to you, Eric, and to you, Jason. You guys should be commended for pulling this together. And so thank you for allowing me to participate. Let me share with you something that I believe Pastor Neil Ellis also kind of talked about, and that is the optimism with which we approach it in education. First of all, I've been in education now for over 20 years as a consultant, and I have learned a lot, and I spend most of my time in districts that are majority African-American or brown. And so what we find in going on now is that our community must shift its response to issues. One of the things that we've done in the past is that we've approached issues school by school or district by district. And I believe that if we are going to see the success that we want to see, we're going to have to approach the problems more systemically than that. Here's what I mean. For example, I think that I have a pretty good handle on how to increase parental involvement at a school or in a district. But that is a school in a district, or that is a district. And I believe that the solution that we need as a people, as part of our culture, is that we have to have a different approach. it should not be about one school or a school and they just happen to have Akko, Kambon, or they just happen to have Jason at that school and they improve, but that there is a systemic, a statewide approach to, or a national approach to how we're going to get increased parental involvement. Here is what I think would address Dr. Moore's issue as well as Mrs. Robinson's, and that is this. What dictates your response, a people's response or an individual's response, is your value system. And so we as a people right now are struggling because there is no consistent value system that we are all buying in on. There is no consistent direction that we're saying, this is good for us as a people. This is good. So we're listening to 15 to 20 different voices, and those voices are taking us in 15, 20 different directions. And so I believe from an educational standpoint, it is only when we stop and pull all of those people together from different walks of life, just as you guys have done here, and say, how best do we move or increase the engagement of parents in this solution? I think that that's when we will see the difference. And then the second part is real quick. I don't believe that we have done a very good job of looking behind the event. The reason I applaud the current movements that exist is that they're not looking at the incident that occurred. They're looking at the system that perpetuates the incident. And so when we're looking at education, we shouldn't be looking at what happened at a particular school. We have to look at the perpetuation of education, its intent, whether or not you're meeting the mandates nationally, whether or not you're meeting the expectations in your community. And I think that once we look at the very basic concept of value system, I think that we'll see the things that we all want.
Thank you very much for that perspective. Dr. Perry, we'd like to bring you in, and I would like to just remind folks that Dr. Perry has a new book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, which is a great read, as they say. Dr. Perry, could you please provide your perspective about business, perhaps, and its impact with Black culture?
Yeah, I'm hoping I can come on video. It's saying I can't join the video, but I'll talk it through nevertheless. Hello, I'm Andre Perry. I'm a fellow at the Brookings Institution. And here I work on majority Black cities and neighborhoods. And what I'm going to start off with in terms of culture, hold on, there I go. What I'm going to talk about in terms of culture and how we should respond can be summarized in this note, in this quote, that there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. There's been a white supremacist myth that goes something like the state of Black cities and neighborhoods and schools are a direct result of the people in them. But my research, which is in my new book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Cities, shows that there are structures in place that limits the wealth building and wealth in our institutions. I'll just give you a few examples. In housing, for instance, I compared home prices in Black majority neighborhoods to places where the share of the Black population is less than 1%. And I controlled for education, crime, walkability, and all those fancy Zillow metrics. And what we found is that homes in Black neighborhoods are undervalued by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Accumulatively, that's about $156 billion in lost equity. And we know that municipalities use that money to fund education, policing, and infrastructure. It's also the money that families use to send their kids to college. In fact, that $156 billion would have funded more than 8 million four-year degrees based on the average cost of a four-year degree. It's the amount, it's the money that people use to start businesses. In fact, it would have funded more than 4.4 million firms based on the average amount Blacks use to start up companies. It's an enormous amount. It would have replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan nearly 3,000 times over that 156 billion. And so when we're talking about the state of Black America, it is not about what we are doing. We got to move away from that language that we need financial literacy and training, and we need to go through these programs. No, I'll give you another example. I scraped all the Yelp data from businesses all across the country. And again, we compared businesses in Black neighborhoods and compared them to businesses in white neighborhoods. And we also found the revenue and the race of the owner of those businesses. And what's amazing is that, and people might be surprised about this, that businesses in Black communities owned by people of color actually score higher on Yelp. I just want to repeat that. We score higher on Yelp, and Yelp is a good indicator of managerial quality and service quality, but we get less revenue, largely because people are avoiding businesses because of the concentration of Blackness in it. Again, we controlled for everything. We controlled for spending power. We controlled for education. We controlled for all those different things. And what it's stating is that what our elders used to say over and over again, if you remember, they always said, our ice is just as cold. And because the elders knew that if you avoid quality in the hood, you distort the market in a way that suppresses economic mobility. That quality businesses in Black neighborhoods are competing with lesser businesses. And I say all that to say, I just give those two examples, that constantly we're talking about what's wrong. Whenever I'm in a meeting and we're talking about business development, we're talking about education, we're talking about housing, someone raises their hand and says, we got to get our stuff together. And I'm telling you right now that if we don't fix the structural racism, we're never going to advance, because it is not us that's hurting us. It's literally, there's policies in place that are extracting wealth every day. Schools with predominantly people of color in them get $23 billion less, $23 billion less than schools with majority white students. Now, we can have all kind of dress codes and all kind of berating parents and all this other stuff. Give me the 23 billion. I mean, give me that. And so and I'm sorry I'm taking too long for this intro, but the point is, I want to always emphasize, and that's the point of my book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, is that we got to stop blaming ourselves for what structurally is happening, taking wealth and opportunity from our communities. So thank you for that long-winded answer.
No, that's right on point. Let's get Dr. Bennett in, and then we'll dive into some conversation. Dr. Bennett, from your vantage point, can you describe what the state of Black culture is? Take yourself off mute. There you go.
Okay, apologies for my technical difficulties. Well, I can tell you what the state of Black culture is in Nashville. I can tell you an initiative that we are putting in place that we hope will make some changes. I'm the curatorial director of the National Museum of African American Music, which will be opening this fall. And the museum is the first national institution that's dedicated to preserving the contributions, the impact that African Americans have made to the music industry and to American history, actually. We're going to celebrate more than 50 genres and subgenres within the museum, and our location is Nashville, Tennessee. If you know anything about Nashville, Tennessee, it's called Music City, and it is known for its country music presence. However, our location is at 5th and Broadway. Broadway is the main thoroughfare of the city where there's a lot of honky tonks and other kinds of shops and that kind of thing. We are right in the middle. And so we are making a statement that attests to the fact that Nashville's music history, its Music City brand, extends far beyond the presence of country music. So we are really excited about that. We hope that we'll attract a new global leisure audience that will come, you know, whenever this COVID thing is over, or even if it is not over, we hope that people will still come out. Of course, we'll make sure that we have COVID sensitive kinds of protocols in place, but it will serve as a tool for employers to also attract and retain employees. We also have a number of minority and Black-owned construction companies that are on the project as well. Many of these people are HBCU graduates. We all know that African-American history is American history, and everything African-American is also American, including its music. So we're really excited to share some of the stories that have been overlooked and miscredited around the origin of these genres, such as blues, jazz, country, rock and roll, R&B, and hip hop. So that's what we're doing here, and we're really excited. And I think that it's long been time for an institution of this type, but especially now with everything going on, we're really excited to come on the scene and tell some untold stories and to shine some light on other kinds of contributions that African Americans have made that most people don't know about or haven't realized yet.
I think that what I hear from the commonalities of each of your comments is that we as a community have a difficult time with expressing our value, whether it's faith, politics, business, music, tourism, education, etc. Can you speak to kind of what should we be doing to help the next generation or the current generation, frankly, kind of understand who they are, what they are, whose they are, and the power that we currently have amongst ourselves, and how do we execute that? That's open topic for anyone to jump in.
Can I jump in on that? I want to say that because, so I'm the millennial generation. I don't know where everybody else falls in line, but one of the things when George Floyd was killed and everybody was throwing up black squares on social media on some arbitrary Tuesday, there was something that was happening within the travel industry, right? And we were already in the midst of COVID. It's funny because the next edition of Condé Nast Traveler that comes out, they gave me the first 2 pages of the magazine to talk about what's going on in the travel industry. And you guys will read that when it comes out. But one of the things that I spoke to in it is how COVID kind of created the perfect storm. We're used to being able to just scroll past these issues. We're used to be able to getting back into our normal schedule and our movement, you know, and the sheer fact that we had nowhere to go, we had to stay home, we had to face this, everybody. It was like the great equalizer in a number of sense in that way. And it made people wake up. One of the biggest things on social media that came out of this in regards to value was this Instagram account called the Influencer Pay Gap, right? I've long since been over the point of being bashful about how much I think I'm worth. It took a while to get there, but once you're there, you don't go back. You can't. Now, what bothered me about what was coming out when we started to hold account to what was happening in the travel industry specifically is that in me being confident in asserting how much I'm worth and asking for what I'm worth, I still didn't realize how far away my white counterparts were, even from what I thought I was worth. I was like, oh, I'm still okay. I thought I was doing something. But because that lack of communication is there, I ended up reaching out to some of my white counterparts as far as influencers, you know, travel media outlets, things of that nature. Like, wait, what are y'all getting for XYZ? And that Instagram account, Influencer Pay Gap, gave content creators an opportunity to anonymously say what their ethnicity was, where they were located, give what their highest paid gig was, and what the deliverables were. And when you see the pay gap based off of ethnicity alone across that Instagram page, it is mind-blowing and infuriating. And so we, No Madness Travel Tribe, we've gotten into the world of data because we want to talk about ownership. Ownership looks like a lot of different things. And one of the things for us that we wanted to get into was data. So I don't know how many people watching are in the actual travel industry. Right now, the only data that has been published that is out is through this company called Mandela Research. And that's the number that everybody throws out, $63 million, the African-American expenditure in the travel industry. We are really curious as to where those numbers came from. As one of the top people in this industry, myself, staff members, other influencers, we've never taken this survey. We've never seen it. And so for us, it became important for us to get into our own data. So literally 2 weeks ago, after 8 weeks of planning out and creating this survey, No Madness has released the diversity and travel consensus. And we've been putting that out. And literally in 2 weeks, we've gotten a bigger sample size than what's already been published from previous people, because the ownership of data is so important right now. This is why you see the Facebook issues and all the stuff coming up. We need to own our own data. And we're going to be coming out with our own report that we will be selling to the industry and other brands at the end of this year in Q4, looking at what the actual trends are. And there's a whole COVID section to look at what the behaviors are going to be in the travel industry after this. So when we're talking about, you know, ownership and what that looks like in value, we also need to have all of our ducks in a row on the back end to be able to speak accurately, but also be able to back that up with numbers like, here, we've actually done our own research and we're not waiting for y'all. And this is what's happening here. And I think that that could help in so many aspects and across the state of Black, you know, Black America and Black culture, regardless of your industry.
Can I add to that? Just because, I mean, Sister Evita jumping on some, I wanted to jump in and co-sign everything she said. As a researcher at the Brookings Institution, we're constantly talking about the importance of data. And I'm just going to buttress what was just said, that it's not just data, that because oftentimes when we report data, we report it in a way that shows racial disparity. That Blacks are here and white people are here. What's wrong with showing racial disparities without providing the context in which they're in, you can be seduced in believing that in order for there to be parity, that in order for there to be justice, Blacks need to catch up to white people. And so for my perspective, no, that is not, that's not how we should be presenting data, because no one invests in problems. If Black people are always seen as the problem that needs to catch up, you invest in white people to fix Black people to have them catch up. At some point, we need to show the strengths of Black people. And I do think we need more information about where we travel, where we're investing, all those different things, because this idea that we are broken is what's wrong. And we get to that by controlling the rhetorical power of data. We talk a lot about narrative, and a lot of the narrative comes out in the data we produce. And so if we want to change this narrative, we also have to take control of the data and present things in a way that shows that we're strong. And when there are weaknesses, we can point to the policies that created that. But to say, because constantly when we're looking at education or income and all these things, that always show, look, Blacks are down here and whites up here, that's not enough. We got to ask why. So when we pinpoint our data, we have got to show how these structures are hurting us, not us hurting us.
You know, another theme that I've heard in the opening comments is about power. And one of the original kind of sources of power for the Black community has always been the Black church. So Bishop, I wondered if you could maybe share a little bit of your perspective about power, the Black church, and how we increase our power.
All right, well, thank you, Eric. Let me just say this then at the offset and responding to your question. Let's keep in mind that the God that we serve, the people in the Black church we serve, we know the Almighty God, the sovereign God. he is a God of generations. So whatever it is, we have been assigned or anointed by God to do in whatever field of endeavor we are in. It is an assignment that is supposed to outlive us. So we are here today, we're talking and we're on this panel, but really everything we do in our fields of endeavors is really supposed to be geared towards the next generation. So I think where we are now as it relates to enhancing the power of the Black church, I think coming out of this crisis, even though we're not fully out of it yet, but even in the midst of it, but definitely by the time we get out of it, we should come up with at least three things. A determination to have greater courage, and courage that forces us to expand and go out of the box in pushing this product for the next generation. But outside of courage, we've got to now be competent, because if the African American church is gonna progress towards that place of destiny that we know it's there for us, and move with a greater level of empowerment, that also has to include influence. And so for power and influence to be real, there has to be competence. So we have to be a courageous people, but we have to be a competent people. We just can't use the excuse of Blackness anymore as a means of entitlement for anything. We have to be competent, especially if we're going to be talking about creating our own data. We've got to be courageous, we've got to be competent, but we've got to also be prepared to engage in critical conversations. And that's why I like this forum today, because I believe that's what we're doing here. We're engaging in critical conversations. As you become engaged in critical conversations, you've got to look back at your history. Okay, where is it that we've come from? What were we able to do in the times of our past? All right, what are we doing now? What have we been able to accomplish in recent times? But really, what is it that we want to lay down for the next generation going forward? And so we got to look at this whole issue of empowerment. I'm excited about it because I know there's strength in unity. And I see the Black church coming together like never before. I said this earlier, I'm repeating it because it's really true. The Black church is coming together like never before, and I believe that will serve as the foundation of the greater source of power we're headed towards.
If I might jump in here as well, as one has identified herself as a millennial, allow me please to identify myself as a boomer who grew up in an era of being a good servant leader, who was committed first to providing what was needed to the community at a sacrifice to self. And so I am very comfortable with a concept of self-worth and self-value, and you know, when I speak and I work in schools, I have a fee structure, and it's a good one. You know, as no doubt all of you who are on this panel, we all get paid fairly well when we do whatever it is that we do. But I think that I've got to add this, and I hope that it's taken in the spirit that is being shared anyway. If we are not careful, the billions of dollars that you talked about, Brother Perry, that's available, that would be available to us on a different paradigm. If our minds are not clear, if we don't have a value system that guides the decisions on how we use that money, then what will happen is we'll give it right back to those very institutions and those very people who have for years oppressed us. So when I take the position that we need to focus in on a value system, and not that you said it, I just want to make this clear. I hope that no one thinks that I'm talking about a deficit, that there's something wrong with us, but rather it governs your value system, governs your response to whatever it is. So when I read, and again, and to those of you who are involved with the data collection, when I read how the African American community spent the $1,200 that they got from the government, you know, collectively. And I saw that the majority, now I don't know if this is true, so you can, if you got better research than the Atlanta Journal, I would love to hear it. But what the article said was, we gave it right back to Walmart. We gave it right back to, what's the other thing, Dollar Tree. We gave it right back to those very corporations that have not done anything in the past necessarily to be supportive of us dismantling systemic racism. So I have to say that I need us to have a different paradigm as a people on how we're going to move forward for that next generation. I know all of you are in schools frequently, talking to teachers and talking to students and talking to parents. But when I hear some of the dialogue that takes place in our schools, I know without a shadow of a doubt that we've got to change the conversation that is being directed at our children. And that comes not only from those outside of our community, but also those inside of our community who are giving expressions of anger, and they're passing it down and without a filter as to how to handle the anger or what to do when you are angry or how to move forward. So please, at least let's agree, if we can, on two approaches. One, we gotta move forward toward collecting the data and look at it from our perspective as a people. And secondly, from my vantage point, we've got to then develop a system that, for us as a people, that allows us to respond to those conditions that are negatively impacting our community, whether outside our community or inside our community. I hope that makes sense, coming from an elder.
Can I come from a Generation Xer? So we got millennials covered, we got boomers, Gen Xers. You know, I will say this, that when it comes to the millennials and younger, I'm actually absolutely encouraged. I actually think there is a value system there that Gen Xers and boomers don't have. You know, they are very competent, particularly around data. Their use of technology and social media, they're this extremely savvy, and they have a lot of spending power that they use collectively. You know, so when I look at, you know, the generations after me, I'm actually encouraged. I worry about the people my age and older. Because when folks said defund the police, which makes perfect sense. I mean, when you look at where are we investing money in terms of policy, we need to move it from things that literally arrest economic mobility to things that increase economic mobility. That makes a whole lot of sense. But the first group that said, no, how would we do this, were older folks. And it's like, well, we've been defunding schools, we've been defunding transportation, we've been defunding housing, and we don't bat an eye. But when it comes to defunding something that's literally killing us, we don't know how to handle it. But it's the younger generation, in my mind, that's putting in that work. You know, when John Lewis, God bless John Lewis,
Doc, we're losing you. We can't hear you, man. We're losing you. So while he's adjusting,
there you go.
There you go. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just saying with John Lewis, when I look at the young John Lewis, if you put these millennials right in this place during the Black Lives Matter minute, they're indistinguishable. they're putting themselves in harm's way for us. And so for me, when I look at the values, I'm looking like this younger generation, they get it. They get it. So the millennial, but they don't necessarily have what I talk about in my book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black City. What we don't have collectively is the investment in the assets that actually can grow wealth and power. Again, our businesses, like the misconception about our businesses is that we need some kind of incubator to teach us how to do finances. Our businesses are just as good. What that's saying is we need financial literacy as much as white people need financial literacy. It's not, we don't need any more, but we constantly question our talent and our skill. And the data, when you look at the data, we're just as good. We just don't get the investment. And so that's why when I talk about we need to change the narrative, we need to highlight that we are strong, that our values are there, but we need the investment to follow up.
So Doc was saying that, let me get Dr. Bennett and Dr. Moore in to comment. So Dr. Bennett, from a music perspective, passing it down to the generation, let's talk about the kind of the influence on our culture, as Dr. Perry talked about, the from the young folks and moving on. Y'all know I'm 42. I love Frankie Beverly. Frankie Beverly is not making a new album. However, we do have some new artists out here. So what kind of influence do some of these what the culture of music have on what's happening now in our industry, or within our nation? Sorry.
Yeah, well, the culture of music is huge. I mean, you know, all the different, in the pandemic, you know, all the different people that were on Facebook that were playing music and giving folks hope and joy. And that's something that we highlight in the museum. We start in the 1600s when Africans first came over as slaves, and we talk about how their traditional musics interacted and how the influence of European melodies blended with the traditional music to create a distinct African-American musical tradition. And so from there, you get spirituals, blues, R&B, jazz, hip hop, and each of those musics were born out of a historical and social circumstances of the people. Or you could say were born out of the lived experiences of the people. So they have always, music has always sustained folks and has always been a balm in Gilead. Now, it depends on where you look. Anytime you look at somewhere in our history, you can usually tell what kind of genre was being created or developed at that time. If you look at the civil rights music, the civil rights movement took gospel songs and changed the words. So if it was, you know, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on Jesus, it became I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. So
Bishop, I see you smiling, Bishop. Go ahead, Doctor.
So pulling back on those, you know, it's going back into your history, which has been echoed here, and borrowing some of those things that have helped sustain us and move us forward and using it in the present day. So we hope that that's one of the things the museum does. We know a lot of people will come in, they'll probably head straight for the hip hop gallery. However, do you know where hip hop comes from? Do you know what was before it? Do you know what it draws? Sampled artist in hip hop is James Brown. Do you know James Brown? We'll go over to the one in their group gallery and find out more about him. So music definitely has been a sustaining factor in not only African-American culture, but just for humanity. I mean, when everything was stripped from us as we came over from Africa as slaves, they couldn't strip our music. They could take our clothes, they could take off our freedom, they could take all these, they couldn't take what we had inside of us, which was an expressive culture. So,
Dr. Moore, so again, I keep hearing all of these commonalities and all these things. How do we use the some of the leveraging points from these different groups or conversations about influencing our people about the pandemic right now? Because obviously all the various groups that we're talking, education, faith, tourism, business, music, all these things can help push the narrative about how we should take this pandemic seriously. Can you give some insight on how you've seen the nation leverage the different groups and opportunities?
Certainly. There's always a reason for everything. And this was most important for me. Let me say this. Data without the context. Thank you, Dr. Perry. And I think it was Evita Robinson who raised the issue about you got to have the data because the data will guide your decision-making. Your decision-making and having the context there. I think Dr. Perry also went back to, he talked about concern about, because I'm a boomer, concerned about how the older generation would view defunding police. But the power that the bishop talked about and how it is the convening of this group and others. Each of us represents an area of expertise coming together. It has to be the willingness, deliberate and being intentional about what we're doing. But I have to tell you, what Dr. Perry didn't list off was the defunding of public health. Classic example. Public health struggles every single year, whether I'm in St. Louis, Cincinnati, struggles for the funding. And the core functions of public health, assessment, assurance, and policy development. We assessed real quick, we didn't have PPE. Where are we getting the money from? The CARES Act, you had to wait. But I go back to the data. I think what we have to do is be willing to really, this is really dating me, reach back in our community and bring somebody up with us to be able to do this.
Amen.
It gets tiring, it is hard work, and we need shoulders. We need to lean on one another. And I have found that to be so important here in Cincinnati. The network, I haven't been here that long, but the people in the community, don't mess with them. What you have to do is work with them. And you have to be willing to take off your commissioner hat, whatever hat you wear, and be with them. Talk with them. I get more enjoyment out of that than sitting in an office fighting with people who don't want to be held accountable. It is my community that has lifted me up. So it's coming together, all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. We're going to have to move to the phase where we do a 1-minute closing summation or a message that you would like to share with all of our viewers and listeners. I apologize to those people who put questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We unfortunately did not get to all of you, and I know Ms. Henry is going to be sore at me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the upper left-hand corner of my screen and just flow through. I think Jason E. Dunn, I think you've got the same screen as I do. And so that means, Bishop, we're going to ask you to lead us off in the summation, and then Dr. Perry, you will conclude, okay? And then we're just going to make a big kind of S. So Bishop, would you please?
Thank you very much, Eric. Again, in my summation, let me say these are, yes, some critical times, but they are some exciting times. And I just believe crisis always pushes into becoming creative. And so being who I am, and even though I don't have a new book out right now, I just want to read like one verse of scripture. And I really want to get that book, quite frankly. It's the first verse of Revelation 4. It has taken me through our national lockdown period here in the Bahamas. After this, I looked, and behold, a door was open in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was, as it were, a trumpet talking to me, and here is what it said: "Come up higher, and I will show you things that you must know after this." And I just say these are some very exciting times, but I believe all of us gonna have to go to a higher level than we were on at the beginning of this year, and hear and see what it is God is saying to us for the areas that he has placed us in and anointed us for.
Thank you very much, Bishop. And you nailed your time. That's the first time I've ever seen a pastor get it right? Okay, Evita Robinson.
Yes, so thank you all. I really appreciate it. I think in our summation, the two biggest things that came out of COVID for Nomadness Travel Tribe is the digital pivot for our travel festival, Audacity Fest. We now have the iteration called Audacity Digi. Our first one was on May 30th, and we had almost 500 people attend from 24 different countries, which also broke our barriers even from our physical festival that we've done the last 3 years. So our next one is on Saturday, August 1st. Next Saturday. Again, it's a travel festival for travelers of colors and our allies. I put the website in the chat, audacityfest.com. Just click the Digi tab if you want to join us. It's going to be amazing, awesome lineups. And if you're interested in taking the data survey, that is our biggest focus. Those are the two things that we leveled up into, as Bishop was talking about, during this time that we were all home and all grounded and not able to travel as per usual. So yeah, if you can help out or attend in any way, it's an amazing event. Even digitally, it's unlike anything you all have seen. So definitely check out Audacity Fest and the survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kambon.
Thank you, my brother. I am very grateful. I too joined Bishop Neil Ellis and others who have said that these are exciting times. Our people have historically succeeded against all odds. I see no reason why we will not continue to do that. I don't believe that there is any force on the face of this earth that will slow us down. There may be some stepping stones. In other words, we must step on some things and maybe even some people to move to the next level. But the bottom line is that we will continue to move it on up. So my hope is that as we leave here today, whether millennials or boomers or Xers or Ys or whatever the generation that we might have represented here, we move here with an understanding that that there is greatness in us, and we will respond to the current conditions, whether that's COVID-19 or the educational system or the financial crisis. We will respond and we'll do exceedingly well. The bottom line, though, for me, because of why I was asked to be here, is that I believe that, as Malcolm said, and perhaps it's dating me, Sister Moore, is that education is the passport to our future. And so I want to make sure that the educational system that has almost every Black child that is and brown child in this country comes through it, almost everyone, that we have a system in place that allows them to mentally develop beyond what any of us in the past may have done. So my hope is that you and others will join us. Brother, bring your book to the school where I'm doing a workshop and we'll push the book. But I want to make sure that everybody releases a spirit of excellence, because ultimately that's what's going to carry us forward. Thank you, my brother, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Dr. Dina Bennett. Oh, mute, yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity as well. I've learned a lot. I agree with a lot of what's been said. I'm gonna buy Brother Perry's book. I hear everyone about being deliberate, intentional, power and influence, but we also have to be competent and courageous And we also have to reach back to the community that has lifted us. And also I want us to keep in mind about the power of music. Of course, I have to plug music because music is such a significant and subjective type of thing and meaningful thing to each of us. And just want to say that on my signature line in my email, I keep this quote from Ralph Ellison. In the swift whirl of time, music is a constant, reminding us of what we were and of that towards which we aspire. Art thou troubled? Music will not only calm, it will ennoble thee.
Okay.
Wow.
Much.
Beautiful. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Dr. Moore, then we're going to go to Dr. Perry, then Jason is going to introduce Reverend Sharpton. So Dr. Moore.
Thank you, everyone. I've learned so much listening and just feel your energy, even though we're so far removed from one another. Education is powerful. Yes, it is. Being engaged with our community. I was so proud of our young people during the civil unrest, and I'm still proud of them. Let's not let that energy die. Let's support that energy and put it in and move it into more impactful for change. Take the time that we have now and fix that which is broken, but lean on one another for your health and your healing. Mask up, social distance, and I stand in solidarity of my sorority sister, Mayor Bottoms.
Beautiful. Okay. Dr. Perry, do you have a book or anything? I don't know.
It's called Know Your Price.
I'm just teasing you. I'm teasing you. No, we've got 1 minute. I'm sorry.
The title of the book, Know Your Price, comes from my favorite play in the whole wide world, Two Trains Running by August Wilson. In the play, the main character, Memphis, is about to have his property seized through eminent domain. The city of Pittsburgh offers him $15,000. The main character, Memphis, says, no, I'm not selling my property. I know my price. I got my price. And it's a refrain throughout the play. There's another character, Kambon, who paints a fence for a ham. He paints a fence, he never gets his ham. He goes throughout the play, give me my ham, give me my ham, give me my ham, until he goes crazy and dies. But there's a happy ending to the story. The main character gets $35,000, well beyond his asking price, and it's assumed he's getting the white rate, the market rate. The moral of the story is, you have to know your worth. But what I try to do with my book is give people the price to stand on, to fight for what they deserve. As was mentioned, when you understand your value, there's nothing you won't do to get it. So we just need the price to stand on, even if it means going crazy and dying. So thank you very much for Jason for giving me an opportunity and my fellow panelists.
All right, thank you so much. Reverend Sharpton is an internationally renowned civil rights leader, founder and president of the National Action Network, which has more than 100 chapters across the country, hailed by former President Obama as a champion for the downtrodden. Reverend Sharpton is the host of the Politics Nation on MSNBC, a nationally syndicated daily radio show, which, by the way, my 6-year-old son dances when you come on, Doc, Keeping It Real, and a nationally broadcast radio show on Sunday titled The Hour of Power. Please help me welcome Rev.Al Sharpton. Reverend Sharpton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very honored and happy to be with you. And let me set it up this way. I travel a lot. I've been blessed to go around the world often. And every time I come back across the Atlantic Ocean, I look down at the Atlantic and think about how many of our forefathers are buried on the bottom of that ocean from the Atlantic slave trade. Many of them did not make it across the Atlantic from West Africa to the United States to be enslaved. And as I thought about it after many trips, I thought about the fact is that those that did make it were the ones that were able to endure the storms, the pandemics, the illnesses, the unsavory conditions, and somehow survived it all. They were the unusually strong. All of them were strong. All of them were well endowed, but these were the ones that were unusually strong to have endured all of that and make it to these shores with their life, even though they would be enslaved and put in servitude once they got here. Why do I start with that? Because it means that we are the children, the heirs of the strongest, most unusual people that came during that trade, and probably among the most unusual in the human history story. So we have in our bloodline, we have in our lineage, unusual ability if we tap in it and we tap into it and we value it rather than run around trying to deny it, run away from it, or apologize for what was done to us, that we were able to survive and thrive. To think about that and place us now in the middle of a pandemic is to say, if anyone in America and anyone in these 50 states have the DNA to survive a pandemic, it's us. Because we have had to survive every pandemic, every abuse, every sense of degradation that could ever come up. Yet we are still here. I remember going to Goree Island once in Dakar, Senegal, and then to the slave castles in Ghana. And both of them have the door of no return. And the guides in both places told me, when I questioned why they called it the door of no return, he said, because once you went out that door, you got to remember they were held almost like a can of sardines, like sardines in a can, in places that were not large enough to hold the amount of them. And when they finally were brought to this door of no return, they were pushed onto boats, knowing that they would never come back to Africa, knowing they'd never see their families again, knowing they would never see the freedom of their village again. They would not be back. But then one day, I watched as President Barack Obama came back through that door. And I talked to my daughters about how little did they know when we left as slaves, then some 300 some odd years ago at that time, that we'd come back the president of the country they formed after killing the natives. That's how we survive and thrive. So if we put that mentality in our head and know the odds that we beat and the victories we won, despite the fact we have so much yet to face, it gives us the strength and the energy to face the fight ahead, because we come from those that have already done the impossible. It's not can we do it, it's will we do it, because we are the children of those that always did it. So yes, a lot of our lives have been altered, a lot of our schedules shattered, a lot of our conveniences thrown out the window. But we went through worse and found a way to make a way anyhow. I remember 2004, I ran for president of the United States. in the Democratic primary. And I'll never forget one night we debated at the Fox Theater, the other contenders for the Democratic nomination and me. We debated at the Fox Theater in Detroit, Michigan. Governor this, Senator that, and myself. And I remember coming off the stage after the debate, and a reporter came up to me from the Detroit Free Press. Said, Rev. Al, I said, yes, sir. He said, great debate. I said, thank you. He says, and you know what? I think you won. I said, well, thank you. He said, no, I'm serious. I said, well, thank you. He said, you ought to be proud of yourself. So I stopped and I looked at him. I said, proud of what? He said, well, just think you standing up there debating governors and senators, and people much better educated, and you held your own. And like I said, I think you even won. You ought to be very proud of yourself. And I looked him in the eye and said, no, they ought to be proud of themselves. He said, what do you mean? Looking a little surprised. I said, well, most of them, probably all of them on that stage tonight with me, were born on third base and think they hit a triple. I wasn't even born in the stadium. I had to work through the parking lot and come down through the bleachers and work my way on the field and then go three bases. If they had started where I started, they might not have been on that stage tonight, which means I must be just as smart or smarter, just as good or better, because I came from further behind, imposed on me, yet ended up on the same stage. This country, the United States, is facing the same pandemic, but we do not approach it from the same background. Those of us that always had to climb up the rough side of the mountain do not panic when we have to go through rough stretches, because we've never had a smooth path. So the question is, what do we do in this hour of roughness and despair when everyone else is unsettled and we should be focused and ready to operate in the midst of this storm, because we've always had to operate in the midst of storm? They don't know what to do because their very security is threatened. Their life is become something that is unsettled and uncertain. And those of us, because of race, that has always had to live unsettled and uncertain, even the most successful of us, we know how to operate because we had to. Not because we wanted to, because we had to. So that's why, in the middle of this, we should be very focused. And I heard one of the panelists said, and intentional, because we ought not be rattled, because we've been here before. And we come from people who've been here before. Many with false illiteracy and other things that were unfair, but somehow they got through. That's why in the midst of the pandemic, when a George Floyd was killed by a man putting his knee on his neck for 8 minutes, 46 seconds, in the midst of a pandemic, young man not many days after that shot jogging named Aubrey in Brunswick, Georgia. In the midst of a pandemic, a young woman shot and killed in her own house in Louisville, Kentucky, Breonna Taylor, when police used a no-knock law to come in the wrong place looking for someone already in custody. In the midst of that, the largest movement we've seen in decades of civil rights emerged. And in many cities, as many or more whites marching than blacks. That's why it can break through when everybody else is so rattled. Because truth crushed the earth will rise again. And even at the risk of their own health, people hit the streets because they were focused and deliberate. And that's what we must do in every area of our life at this time, whether it's in business, education, government, whatever your track. If you are the one that can see when others are blinded, if you are the one that can move forward when others are lost, this is the time real leadership will emerge. If you look at who's in the White House now, he has no idea what to do. If you look at those that are captains of industry, they don't know what to do. Just throw millions. Got problems. Let's give to this, give to that. Look at those in the high levels of academia. They don't know what to do. Just buy everybody's black book, call it black, and it's a bestseller. If we design a plan that will deal with our economic empowerment, our educational excellence, and dealing with our civil and legal rights, and intentional now, we would be firm in the midst of all of this that is missing. So I encourage you as a coalition to focus in those areas and those that have the expertise in that area, those areas, and lay out a plan, and let's use this moment, this energy, because everybody else is shaking. And we are the ones that should be the most stable. That's why we're having a march in Washington, August 28th, not just have another rally. And we making people wear the mask and social distance, but to say, no, we want laws, the voting rights law that was never corrected when the Supreme Court sent it back in 2013, and the George Floyd justice law. That's what civil rights community is going to do that day, the anniversary of the March on Washington. While they want to mourn John Lewis, we want to continue what he was about. That's why we need to deal with Mnuchin and the business community. They're putting out billions of dollars to save businesses. Well, I've been working with Robert Smith and others to make sure that that money is set aside. A portion of that money must come to Black business. So as they go for the second round now, the Congress asked for $3 trillion. Even McConnell's saying $1 trillion. As that comes back around, we've got to make sure that that's in part put aside for Black businesses. Same in other areas. Now is the time to prove our mettle. I don't know how long the pandemic's gonna last, but I know if we do what we're supposed to do, that when it is over, we can be further down the road than we were, because we knew how to, as Gladys Knight used to say, make the best out of a bad situation. That's where our spiritual strength comes from, because we've always had to depend on what we believed in more than what we had. That's why I said at George Floyd's funeral that what has brought us this far is not just hope. Hope is a good thing. Hope is a thing that brightens up your day, but there are things in life that hope will be there. But the other side of hope, my mama raised me by herself on welfare, is faith. Faith is not the end of a calculated plan. Faith is not what you can figure out. Faith is not even what makes sense. Faith is when you know the end, even if you don't know why it's going to end that way. Faith is when you're sick and the doctors give up and you believe in another doctor. Faith is when you got a pile of bills and no money and you say, I don't believe God brought me this far to leave me now. Faith is when everybody rejects you, everybody says no, and you say, I'm going ahead anyhow. Faith is what brought us from the outhouse in the South to the White House in Washington, D.C. under Obama. Faith. We didn't stop believing. We didn't let the darkness of the hour make us forget there's a light somewhere. And we must believe that in this hour and grab that light and empower our community and empower ourselves. It's bad time for people with bad faith. It's opportune time for those that believe in light and darkness. This could be your end or could be your moment. As to what others do, I don't know. But as for me and my house, I'm going to serve the Lord. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Sharpton. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for taking time. We know that you had to squeeze us in, and we thank you for that inspirational message because it's really very meaningful, certainly to me on a personal level, but also to all of the hundreds of people who are listening to the webinar. So thank you very much, Reverend Sharpton. Also, I want to thank Dr. Kambon, who was on, Dr. Bennett, Dr. Melba R, Evita Robinson, Bishop Neil Ellis, Dr. Andre Perry, and also my co-host, Jason Dunn, for all of his work in putting this together. We also have to recognize two other people, Marlinda Henry and Jourdan Ivory, who helped on the back end and helped get everything together. Just some key themes that I found today: the importance of data, focus, power, faith, confidence, as well as our past has hardened us and toughened us so that we are prepared right now for the challenges that we face today. I'd like to conclude by having a moment of silence for Representative John Lewis, as well as Reverend C.T. Vivian. Thank you very much. Jason, did you want to add any other comments?
My only comment is keep getting into good trouble. Have a good day. God bless.